Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Lama Dawa Zangpo. This is Introduction to Buddhist Philosophy and Meditation and related topics. I want to invite any of you that have questions to submit them in the comments section below, and be happy to address them. This is to be of benefit to you, the viewer. So, Tal, you are our student here tonight. Do you have any particular questions or comments based on your practice over the last week or so since we spoke last?
Not at this time. Everything is going as I guess you would imagine for a beginner. Have a lot of chatter. I keep on reclaiming my focus and then being drifting away in chatter and doing it again and again.
Okay,
Focusing on the breath, basically
great.
it.
Well, that's good. That's perfect. That's great. What I wanted to discuss tonight, a topic that we have not talked about, which is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a really common word that's used all the time in both secular and Dharma circles, and it means probably different things to different people. We've been talking a lot about shamatha over the last couple months in terms of how to settle the mind, how to get the mind to return to the point of, or the object of meditation, and to learn how to stay with that, to keep coming back to it, to extend that, to stabilize that. It's called shamatha or shine in Tibetan, which means calm abiding or abiding in a state of tranquility or peacefulness. And it is sort of the foundation of further meditations in the future, because if the mind is not able to stay on an object, there's no depth, there's no real strength of concentration and focus, which is required later for analytical meditations, for doing insight meditation, or for holding more complicated, more complex visualizations in one's mind, which are all ways to work on building up not only the mental muscles of concentration, but to stabilize the mind in, sometimes we use a term we call sacred outlook, which we will get to in future weeks. But this is having a view that's informed by one's meditation, by one's study. And the view is very, very important in the context of Tibetan Buddhism in particular. It's where we start to understand what we're seeing or experiencing in terms of Buddhist philosophical understandings of emptiness, doctrine, and things like that. So, but we start with stabilizing the mind, with getting the mind to just stay present, stay clear, stay focused. We've talked about this quite a bit, so I'm not going to belabor it. But I want to kind of circle back and come back to something that's very foundational in Buddhist meditation, and that is mindfulness, this notion of mindfulness. So it's kind of interesting to me because many people come to this channel or come to Buddhism in the West, and they find a teacher. It could be a Zen Roshi, it could be a Tibetan teacher, a Lama, and kind of dive right in, and which is fine. But there's something to be said for having some foundation under us instead of just jumping right into the deep end of the pool. So I want to go back to something which is when many Western sincere and very sincere people that are interested or find themselves discovering Buddhism and find that it's speaking to them on some level, and it's addressing their needs or some deeper inner longing or something for connection, or for just some kind of deeper, more profound understanding of how things are. So whatever the case that brings people to this, there's often not that much grounding in, let's say, meditation. And more than that, people jump into this, but have very little exposure to the Buddha himself, the person, the Buddha Shakyamuni, who founded this. Everything that we do, everything we study, everything ultimately that we practice It does come from this source. Otherwise, we couldn't really call it Buddhism. And there are certain Buddhist criteria. Again, we talked about this a couple months ago. And these are the doctrine of emptiness, the unfindability of a self, the fact that everything is in a state of change, or we use the word impermanence, and then the notion of unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and so on. And then the fact that there is a solution to the existential dilemma, which is, we can call it nirvana, enlightenment, the recovery of one's Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. But it's interesting that many of us have little to no kind of real exposure or direct connection with the Buddha himself. And he taught many, many things. And we don't have to study all the things, and it's not necessary. But there are some things that are very important. And I think it would really be helpful for many of us to kind of go back over a few of these things. What the Buddha taught are known today as sutras, literally what came out of his mouth, what he actually taught to his students while he was alive in his lifetime. And he was addressing different needs of different students, people from different backgrounds and all walks of life. So these are known as the sutras. And some of the most important ones that are considered very foundational talked about mindfulness. And when he talked to the gathering of people that were around him, that were hanging on to his every word, that were really trying to understand what he was saying and what they wanted to apply, what he was teaching, so that they could apply it into their own practice and their own lives. He basically started with this notion of mindfulness. But what he meant by this is more than probably what most Western people and modern people sort of understand as mindfulness. Because again, it's just sort of a overused and maybe sometimes misused term. He said we need to really notice what we're noticing. Essentially, in these sutras, he talked about a meditator is hyper aware, is kind of zeroes in on what's going on. What's going on, particularly, he started with the body. So it's about noticing and not necessarily obsessing or dwelling or being compulsive, but he wanted us, he said the beginning of this path is to be really clear, and we could almost say honest, honestly seeing what's going on. And again, doesn't mean we're judging it. This is a very important distinction. But it is noticing. It's noticing what's going on with your body, with sensations, with discomfort, with pleasure, with the breath, where there's tightness, how is the posture. He basically was saying, check in with yourself and cultivate this actually as a practice. Just being hyper vigilant, very mindful, very attentive, and that this is the foundation. This is how we really start. And you could almost say it's a mistake to jump over that and sort of leap into other aspects of meditation. So I just wanted to mention this. I'm not going into any depth here. There's plenty of things written about this. It's deceptively simple. But the point is, we almost have to pay your dues. You have to put some time into some of these things. If you really are in this for the long haul, if you really want to have meditational results or favorable, outcomes in the future, if you want to make progress on this journey, because it is like that. You start meditating today or last month or next week, And time goes by. And if you're consistent, and consistency really is the key here, then as months go by, it turns into years. And as years go by and you're still meditating and you're staying consistent, decades will go by. And my point is this is a lifelong practice. It's not something we do for 6 months or even a couple of years and go, oh, okay, I'm done with it. I did that. Because there's almost an infinite amount of, there's an infinite depth to meditation. And I'm going to just say this as sort of a little warning, kind of. I've had many people over the years tell me, oh, I used to meditate, or I meditated for a long time, but I've stopped. These people have burned out. They've gotten bored, or you could say complacent. And I always say the same thing. I say, oh, what a mistake, because you don't know what your next meditation session will bring you. You don't know what's around the corner. Don't stop short of the goal. Just keep going. And so much of what we learn through meditation is to drop expectations. It's the expectations that trip us up. We think we're going to have visionary experiences and all kinds of, magical things happen in our mind, or we're going to levitate, or whatever people think. This is a more mundane, but the profound insights are anything but mundane. Profound insights are really precious, and like putting sticks on a fire to get the fire to blaze hotter and bigger. Our little insights will lead to the combustion, the burning, the flaming up of true wisdom. And that's the most precious commodity of all, because no one can really take that from you. And it's what we're after. We're not after bliss, like blissing out. That's not the Buddhist way. There are certain, let's say, spiritual traditions in the world where it seems that that's what the teachers emphasize, or that's what the students expect. It's just, they just want to bliss out. Buddhism, we're not trying to bliss out. We're trying to wake up. It's a very big difference. And waking up really starts with mindfulness. It starts with this path of being willing to be present. Really, that's what mindfulness means. It's a willingness to be unflinchingly, profoundly present. So when we have sensations we don't like, we have thoughts we don't like, we have experiences that are uncomfortable, the normal human way is to suppress, ignore, cover up, medicate, do whatever we can do to sort of be in even denial. And let's be clear, the path of the Buddha, the path that we have inherited, the path we are on, is a path of being fully awake and present, having all the lights turned on, and being willing to accept it, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's not all pretty. It's not all just fun and games. This is life in its full, entire complexity. And we have to be willing. That's why we're here. We're not here to pick and choose, oh, I'm only going to select what I like. I mean, you can do that to some extent, but when we really step back and we're talking about the big picture, meaning our existential situation, our existential dilemma, our existential situation, we're here right now, somewhere between birth and death. We are alive as we know it. And yet, we are on a journey. This situation we're in between birth and death, we're moving in one direction. We're moving closer and towards death. That's inevitable. Just stating the obvious. So that means being fearless, because it ain't easy to stare at death and see that it's coming towards us. It might be far away. We don't know how long this tunnel is till we get to the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But in fact, as the Buddhists say, death is inevitable, and it's also 100% certain that it's uncertain when it will happen. We may think we have 40, 50 years ahead of us. We may think we have, decades of time. But the reality is, we could have a disease right now that's going to cut our life short, and we don't even know it because we haven't been diagnosed yet. Or we get in our car and car accident, or any of a myriad of things. Now, again, I'm not trying to be grim or dramatic, or depressing. I always say this is a path of kind of brutal honesty. And we have to be willing to be brutally honest about our existential situation. That's waking up, that's being present, and it's staying mindful. So, yes, bliss comes. Yes, wonderful things can happen during meditation. Yes, life is full of amazing experiences and almost heartbreaking beauty. But this is about the totality. It's really about embracing the totality. And not necessarily for the faint of heart. So from this standpoint, maybe I should have said this months ago, but I like to say that Buddhism is not a hobby. It's your life. And it is a matter of life and death, in a sense. We don't talk about saving our souls in Buddhism, but this is a journey, and there are consequences to how we live our life in every moment. Mindfulness is a reclaiming of responsibility by acknowledging and being willing to commit to being present, to being mindful. That is our commitment. That is what we're doing on this particular path. That's how we're of service to ourselves and to others. This is, like I said, not a hobby, because this is not even just about this life. If we really drill into this, we talk about, well, what is this experience, this life? We have this identity in this lifetime with this body, with these parents, with this culture, speaking this language, eating this kind of food, listening to this kind of music, all the things we do that we own as me, as I. But there's a huge but. That's not necessarily who we really are. And ultimately, the path of Dharma and the path of meditation is the uncovering or the discovery of who we really are. And that is something that outlives this life, outlives this body. Again, I'm not talking about souls. We don't use that word in Buddhism, but we talk about mind. We say the mind is beginningless and endless. The mind continues even after the physical body dies. There is some continuation of mental inertia, something in motion stays in motion according to Newtonian physics. This is really Newtonian physics. The mind continues. It's just in a different form in the sense that it's unencumbered by the physical body. It doesn't have the same physical form to identify with, to sort of hold it down or hold it back or restrict it or limit it or define it. So ultimately, what meditation is going to get us to is a profound experiential understanding of our true nature. Not being male, not being American, not being this, that, or the other, but mind itself. It starts with mindfulness. So take that as your path. If you're any kind of a meditator, particularly you're relatively new to this, notice what you're noticing, but don't hold on to it and don't obsess on it. Just notice and release. Notice and release. This is sort of classic, you could say almost Theravadan style meditation. But Tibetan meditation encompasses the Theravadan. It encompasses everything that the Buddha taught. It's very important to know that. We don't necessarily reject parts of the Dharma, but we learn how to skillfully apply what's relevant to ourselves. So I wasn't going to spend the whole talk this evening talking about just mindfulness, and yet it's really, really important. And I appreciate your patience in indulging me in talking about this a little bit. It's very basic. It's so basic that many people just think we can throw it away or just dispense with it or move on. But to do it properly, to do it correctly, to do it mindfully, we just give it a good chance, give it a good shot, do it. It's my heartfelt advice. Okay. Any last momentary questions, Tal, or anything at all?
You mentioned Dharma. I wanted to just know a little bit more of the actual meaning of Dharma, because I kind of get a sense that it has multiple meanings.
Dharma does have multiple meanings, but the most common in the way we're really using it here in this case is Dharma refers to the teachings of the Buddha, the Buddhist teachings. Okay. It has many other meanings. It actually means phenomena. All things are dharmas. All phenomena are dharmas.
In reading the Four Contemplations, I kind of gathered that it kind of also means the like a truth of the universe or something like that.
Well, you could say Dharma means truth. That could be another definition of it. But again, we don't have to read too much into it. As it's generally used, Dharma just really refers to teachings.
Okay.
I mean, I think at this stage of things, we could pretty much leave it at that that's an adequate answer for the circumstances right now.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.